Actually, Guru Nanak was several centuries ahead of his time when he said that women and men are equal. I mean, to quote him, he said, "O kyun manda akhiye jin jamme rajan." And we have the example of Mai Bhago, who actually fought with the men in combat in Guru Gobind Singh's forces. But I think the most lasting historical legacy of Banda Singh Bahadur was that he restored lands to the tillers, destroyed the Mughal records of land, and created his own land registry, which I believe is largely prevalent in Punjab and Haryana even today. When I embolden the sparrow to hunt the hawk, then shall I be known as Gobind Singh. So he inspired the common citizens by creating the Khalsa Commonwealth to stand up and fight for their freedom of worship. And these were then the sparrows which took on the mighty Mughal hawk. So that's the significance of the title.
Hi everyone, this is Vishakha. Welcome to our show Conversations. So today we have with us Major General Pushpendra Singh, who is a retired Indian Army officer and a prolific writer. He has written about Indian Defence Services, a children's book co-authored with his wife, and a historic fiction, The Hawk Hunters. So first of all, a very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you, Vishakha.
So as I said that today we are going to talk about the historic fiction you have written, The Hawk Hunters. So the title is an intriguing one. What is its significance?
Towards the end of the 17th century, Aurangzeb unleashed a torrent of terror and torture, trying to convert all of Hindustan to Islam. In the Punjab, Guru Gobind Singh resolved to oppose this onslaught. And he said, "Chidi se main baaz ladaun, tabhe Gobind Singh naam kahaun." When I embolden the sparrow to hunt the hawk, then shall I be known as Gobind Singh. So he inspired the common citizens by creating the Khalsa Commonwealth to stand up and fight for their freedom of worship. And these were then the sparrows which took on the mighty Mughal hawk. So that's the significance of the title.
All right, sir. So tell us something about the audiobook.
Yeah. My publisher sent me a couple of samples, audition samples, to transform my book into an audiobook.
Okay.
But I found that these samples were absolutely flat and they lacked that dynamism which is the characteristic of the book. So I decided that why don't I do the recording myself.
Right.
And when I was doing this recording, I could experience the energy, the enthusiasm, and the emotions which I was then able to express in my narration.
Right. So you have narrated a riveting saga of romance, heroism and betrayal set against the backdrop of the momentous period of Sikh history. And in the tradition of the historic fictions, this is perhaps the first one which tells about the sacrifices made by the young sons of Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the 10th Sikh Guru, and its aftermath. So what made you write this one?
Well, actually about 25 years ago, I was visiting Rajouri in Jammu and Kashmir, and the local commander mentioned that we are passing Banda Singh Bahadur's house.
Okay.
Then I realized that he was the general who was ordered by Guru Gobind Singh to free Punjab from oppression. So he started out with 25 soldiers and liberated the entire tract from the outskirts of Delhi, at the Jamuna, outskirts of Delhi, to the outskirts of Lahore at the Ravi. By any standard, this is a colossal military feat. So I was hooked and I wanted to study this military campaign.
Right. So as we all know that a lot of research is required before writing a book. What research did you do for the story?
Well, I read up a lot of books, but I found that as far as the military campaign is concerned, the details were very sketchy. Even Professor Ganda Singh's authoritative book on Banda Singh Bahadur had only the sequence of events and their locale, but lacked any relevant military detail. So I thought that why don't I go onto the ground and see for myself the battle sites, which are very around Chandigarh only, and maybe I'd gain some insights into that.
Right.
So I took leave and recce'd the important battle sites, and there I took detailed terrain notes. But soon after that I got posted out to Jabalpur as a GOC with jurisdiction over 7 states. So I really had no time to write the book while in service. After retirement, I found my notes, and since the military details were very in outline only, I decided to flesh them out by filling them in with visualization of what would have happened,
right,
and therefore made it into a historical fiction.
Right. So as you mentioned in the beginning that you visited the places yourself. So places like Samana, Kapuri, Logar, they exist, they still exist in Punjab and Haryana today. So what your study says about these places, and how did you fit them into your narrative?
Well, actually, I didn't fit them into the narrative. They already were there in the narrative, in Banda Singh Bahadur's campaign. For example, Samana was the first offensive action in the Punjab for many centuries, because the Punjab was the Mughal bastion, because their homeland came through Punjab. And the fall of this Samana stronghold was the first fall of a Mughal stronghold in 200 years plus. Now, if we go a couple of days northeast of Samana, maybe 3-4 days, we come to a place called Kapuri. And Kapuri had a Jagirdar, or an estate owner, whose name was Kadamuddin.
Okay.
And he was a very evil and vicious sexual predator, which has been recorded by Professor Ganda Singh. And now, about a day's march further north of that is Sadhora. Sadhora was the hometown of a Muslim Sufi saint, Badruddin Shah, commonly known as Buddu Shah. He was murdered by General Osman Khan because of his Sufi beliefs. And Osman Khan then became the military governor of Sadhora, and he oppressed the Hindu population there just as described in the book, in my story.
Okay.
Now, if we follow the Som Valley north of Sadhora, just adjoining Sadhora, we come to a place where the Shivalik hills suddenly abruptly rise in vertical clay cliffs.
Okay.
And there is a place there called Mukhlispur, which Banda Bahadur then created as his capital and called it Lohgarh, the steel citadel. So these are the places which you mentioned.
Right. And what about the compelling love story?
Yeah, to carry the story forward, I created this love story. Sikh farmer soldier falls headlong in love, and she with him, with a Muslim noblewoman, while the battle for freedom is still raging. But he is compulsively drawn to fight for freedom against her own people, and both the lovers face strong family opposition to their union, but they are determined to somehow overcome all odds and succeed in their love. Do they? Well, you'll have to listen to the story.
Right. So you have portrayed a number of well-known historical characters like Banda Singh Bahadur and Wazir Khan. Do any other historical characters also portray in the story or feature in the story?
Yeah, there are several historical characters, but I can tell you about a few of the prominent ones.
Sure, sir.
Qadmuddin and Usman Khan we've already covered.
Right.
There was one Mughal general, Sayyid Beg, who became Guru Gobind Singh's disciple. Then there was Muhammad Muazzam, who succeeded Aurangzeb as the emperor and took the title Bahadur Shah. And the third one which I'd like to mention is Muhammad Amin Khan, Chin Bahadur. He was the Nawab of Muradabad, and he was the first to mount the severed Sikh heads on poles and parade them before the emperor. And then thereafter, for many decades, this became a fashion. Sikhs were hunted down, their heads mounted on poles and displayed at important communication centers, population centers.
So the story also narrates some moral dilemmas which the warriors have faced across ages. Would you like to discuss about those?
Yeah, if you read history, it is replete with examples of moral dilemmas.
Right.
But this issue got prominence particularly after the Nuremberg trials in the West, after the Second World War. My story also, the historical figures are confronted with moral dilemmas which they resolve according to their own conscience or the lack of it.
Right.
To name, firstly, the Mughal general Sayyid Beg, he witnessed the treachery being perpetrated against the holy man Guru Gobind Singh, became his disciple, and actually commanded Sikh troops at the Battle of Anandpur, where he was martyred. Then we have Nawab Sher Khan of Malerkotla. He was at Wazir Khan's court when the intent of Wazir Khan became clear to torture and kill the two young sons of Guru Gobind Singh, whom he had taken as political prisoners. They were 6 years and 8 years old, young boys. And he was appalled at this. So he stood up in the court and he said that Islam does not teach us to make war on women and children. What you're doing is absolutely morally indefensible. And he said, I cannot be a party to this. So he, with his kinsmen and supporters, left Wazir Khan's court in protest. On the other hand, you have Suchanand, who was Wazir Khan's Peshkar. He was a Hindu. And he, exactly after this incident, he's the one who sealed the fate of the 2 young boys. And lastly, of course, is Wazir Khan, who, despite the immorality and the heinousness of his action being pointed out so forcefully by Sher Khan, persisted with the torture and the murder of these 2 young boys.
So the Hawk Hunters also has a number of women characters with widely different persona. Would you like to discuss about it?
Yeah. Actually, Guru Nanak was several centuries ahead of his time when he said that women and men are equal. I mean, to quote him, he said, O kyun manda akhiye jin jamme rajan. How can we consider women inferior when they give birth to kings?
Absolutely.
And this was several centuries ahead of the suffragette movement in the West and the fight to have a single vote for the women. Even Guru Gobind Singh gave equal status to women in Khalsa society. And we have the example of Mai Bhago, who actually fought with the men in combat in Guru Gobind Singh's forces. So like that, there are several prominent characters, very disparate in their characteristics. And these characters also serve to highlight the contrast between the treatment of women in Muslim society and Sikh society, an issue which is relevant even today.
Exactly. So what, in your opinion, is the story's historical significance?
Okay. Firstly, the heinous act of torturing and murdering 2 young children aged 6 years and 8 years must rank as the most dastardly crime in human history. Then the resolve of these 2 young boys not to give in to torture and inducement over several days of slow torture, of being bricked alive, and stand firm in their faith, probably is unparalleled in world history. The third one is that Banda Singh Bahadur's War of Independence, if you like, was the first blow for freedom which had been done in the bastion of the Mughals in Punjab since the advent of Babur. And he liberated, as I said, the area between the Yamuna on the outskirts of Delhi and the Ravi on the outskirts of Lahore. In fact, his forces were beaten back from the Shalimar Gardens in Lahore. And this area is roughly the size of Hungary. And there they established the first Sikh rule. Banda Singh Bahadur established that. And he also minted the first Sikh coin, which, according to the American Numismatic Society, is struck in the name of the true Lord of the universe and dedicated to Guru Nanak, Guru Gobind Singh, not in his own name. And later on, Maharaja Ranjit Singh also emulated this example. But I think the most lasting historical legacy of Banda Singh Bahadur was that he restored lands to the tillers, destroyed the Mughal records of land, and created his own land registry, which I believe is largely prevalent in Punjab and Haryana even today.
So, what are your future writing plans, sir?
Well, as of now, I haven't got any project in mind, but I'm sure something will, keep bubbling up inside me, and then I will proceed with that. And maybe I will, instead of writing something, I'll record an audio book or something.
Wow, amazing. So looking forward to it, sir. And any message you would like to give to the upcoming writers?
Well, be absolutely involved and carried in your subject, whatever you're writing, whether it is fiction or non-fiction. That's my message.
Wow, so it was amazing having a conversation with you, sir. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Vishakha. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure having you here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.